Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Dergacheva. I'm currently on the board of the Drupal Association, and we really hope that you've been enjoying day 2 of DrupalCon. Our next speaker is an activist, organizer, and founder of the Ferguson Response Network. I'm so pleased to present to you today Leslie Mack.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm so excited to be here with you today and so grateful to the DrupalCon Global team for making this huge and, might I say, heavy lift from an in-person event to this wider global audience so that more people can participate and speakers like myself get to still share our knowledge with all of you. And I'm so happy to be here today to talk specifically about building a flexible digital brand through the lens of a project that I have been working on over the last year and a half called Black Women For. My name is Leslie Mack. I'm a digital strategist, organizer, and trainer. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so let's get started. Let's just jump into the story of Black Women For. And so I'll be walking you through the context of the project and then sharing some gems about how we as the lead team needed to kind of make some strategic decisions to ensure that we had the flexibility we needed to continue doing this work. Politics is sticky, and doing political work can be a challenge, especially as digital strategists. And so I'm hopeful you can take some gems from this presentation to apply to your work in the world, generally speaking. So in the beginning, Black Women For started as a lot of great ideas start in a group chat. I'm blessed enough to be connected to a significant cadre and cohort of amazing Black women and gender nonconforming Black folks that are doing amazing work in the world. And we started having conversations last summer around this question of what did we want to do around the upcoming Democratic primary? How did we want to show up specifically in different ways than we did in 2016? And what would it mean for us to kind of come together and try to build a space or a container specifically for Black progressive women, gender nonconforming, and non-binary Black folks to have conversations about the upcoming Democratic primary? The photo you see here is some of our squad members, which include Angela Peoples, who is the director of Black Women For, Nalini Stamp, who is one of the leadership of the Working Families Party, Jessica Bird, who is an amazing political thought leader and runs 3-Point Strategies. So just a few of the folks that were part of this initial conversation of what eventually became Black Women For. So one of the things that we really started coalescing around was that as Black women and gender nonconforming Black folks, we really could not wait for a single party, whether it be the Democratic Party or any other party, or even a specific candidate to organize us. This was not a time where we felt that we could wait for other people to do the work of bringing our folks together. And this is a really foundational point of how we were able to build a flexible brand within the context of something as static as a primary election. So we really talked a lot about what it would take to show up as our full unapologetic selves in a political setting, and also how an invitation could be sent out to people like us to join us in these conversations and digging a little bit deeper into how we wanted to show up in the world. So what we came up with was a 3-tiered approach to building community and building consensus. We really didn't want this tied specifically to any political party, political candidate, or even a specific process that other folks have undertaken, whether it be through voting systems or polling or anything like that. And so the 3 things that we decided to engage in were meant to build community, to connect people directly with each other, and to have some of the conversations that often get left to the side, especially as Black women and further marginalized people as non-binary and gender non-conforming Black folks. So the 3 ways we developed to engage were in real life, in-person meetups. Obviously, this was pre-COVID-19, so we had the pleasure of being able to do that. We also recognized the need to build some digital meetup spaces for folks that were not in the locations where we were holding our in-person events. We wanted to make sure nobody felt left out. And lastly, we did want some data-driven information involved in our decision-making processes. And so we created an online survey that folks could take to give us additional information and, again, additional data to help us make our information. So you can see these three things are by themselves already quite flexible. It's not, you can see this isn't a membership base. You don't have to be a member to go to a meetup or to take the survey. It's really casting as wide a net as we can, using specific identity of Black women, gender nonconforming, and non-binary Black people as the basis of the work that we were doing. So let's talk and dive a little bit deeper into how each of these three-tiered approaches went. So the first was our in-person meetups. I just put up some graphic images that we utilized to promote each of the meetups that we had, which were 12 cities all across the country. We were in Oakland, Charlotte, the ones that I have listed up here, Milwaukee, Houston, Fort Lauderdale. We also were in DC. We had New York City, Chicago, Houston, and quite a few other cities. I don't need to list them all, but I wanted to show you the images that we used, because one of the things that was really important about the flexibility of the brand was to allow local leaders and local folks to feel as though this invitation was specific to them. So the Milwaukee invitation looks different than the Oakland invitation. And what images and graphics and language that we use to invite people in Charlotte looks different than it did in Fort Lauderdale. This, again, is another key piece to building a flexible digital brand. It does not have to be cookie cutter. Everything doesn't need to look exactly the same. And so cater to your audience in a way that they can hear what you're saying and that they feel as though they've been taken into account for the invitation that's being extended to them. The other thing that was really critical for us, you'll note that there are hosts for each of these cities that are listed, and those are all locally embedded and locally grown organizers for each of these cities. So while we were doing national work to talk about a national primary, what we did was we empowered local organizers to really be the folks on the ground that were, one, deciding who was invited to each of these in-person meetups, two, deciding the format for them. Some were very intimate and in someone's living room. Others were at organization locations and much more formalized. This really was a stroke of genius, and I'll definitely give it up to our director, Angela Peoples, for having this really staunch focus on making sure that local folks were the ones driving these in-person meetups together. Again, this is more about flexibility. You're not forcing people into a rigid format that they have to follow. You're giving them tools, some containers and structures, and allowing them to do what they do best, which is build community. And so when the invitation went out, it wasn't from me or from Angela. Well, in Charlotte, it was from me, but generally it wasn't from Black Women For as an entity. It was an invitation from somebody that these communities already knew, already trusted, and that knew who needed to be in the room to have these deep discussions and conversations. The third thing is we made sure that someone from the Black Women For team actually went and attended every single one of the local in-person meetups. And this is so that there was some consistent messaging about the project itself. And we really felt strongly about this to ensure that there was no confusion and there wasn't kind of any telephone type messaging that went through. So things did not get distorted. So either Angela or myself was on the ground in each of the cities attending these events to let people know what Black Women For was, what we were attempting to do, and how they could connect more directly with the work we were putting together. From there, at each of the meetups, it became Black women and gender nonconforming love fest. I have some images up here from several of the events, and you can see this really was a space that people felt loved, they felt held. We ate together, we broke bread, And then we got down to having some really, serious conversations about the state of the world today, about the needs that they are seeing in their lives, and their hopes for this Democratic primary. What were they looking for? What were they hoping to see? How did they want to show up differently? It was really beautiful to see people come together in all different ways. This was multi-generational. We had young people, we had elders, we had organizers, we had moms, we had people that had never organized in their life or have not been involved in political processes, all the way to people who had run for office themselves. And so using this wide and, again, flexible framing for the work we were trying to do, it was an invitation that nobody was left out, that everybody had a place and that everybody's voice was valued. People are experts at their own lives. And so we took that adage with us into this process to ensure that the conversations that were held were really captured in a way that lifted up the voices of the people that attended and the communities and pieces of communities that they represented. And it was a really amazing time during the summer and the fall of last year to see these events unfold and to just witness the joy of people being invited into spaces together to have these great conversations. And what we heard most often was this was the first time they had been invited to just talk about what they were thinking about and not with any other agenda. And that's another part of the flexibility piece, which is that you can have a goal of holding conversations without a specific outcome that you need everyone to get to. And I think people really appreciated that the invitation was not about who you might be supporting. It really, truly was a connective conversation around what our needs were and what we could potentially do in the coming months and the coming year. Digital meetups were the second piece of our three-tiered approach of building community and consensus, and this was an opportunity for folks to gather digitally. I spearheaded the digital meetup pieces as a digital organizer, and it was really wonderful. We held two initially and continued to hold more as the project went on, but I put some graphics up so y'all can see and get a little bit of the flavor that we were looking for. This really was an opportunity, again, for people that were not in the cities that we held in-person meetups to gather in an online space, but the conversation was the same. We brought the same questions to the table. We asked for the same level of vulnerability and openness. And we also were able to break into smaller groups to have some more intimate conversations about how things were looking in their lives. What were the things that were most important to them in the upcoming election? And if there were any candidates that they were intrigued by, or that they were feeling, or that they thought were interesting and wanted to know more information about. And lastly, we had our online survey, which was really amazing to roll out. We got just under 700 responses to the survey, and it was great just to see the responses that we had around what was most important to them in this election. We got so many different responses, from education to healthcare to economic stability, to just getting 45 out of office. It was a pretty wide spectrum. We also included a poll with some of the Democratic primary candidates and allowed people to kind of tier them and say which ones that they were feeling and why. And it really gave us a good understanding and a good temperature taking of where folks stood and what they were interested in hearing more and more about. So the flexibility of piece of this survey was that it was data driven, but it also had some really great open-ended questions that we were able to build upon and take into our steering committee conversations as we were making our decisions about where to go next. So I wanted to talk a little bit about brand identity, because one of the things that can trip us up often, especially if we're working in political sectors or in any other area that is very rigid, it's hard to build a brand outside of those structures. And so a shout out to Kevin Bennett, who is our digital strategist for Black Women For, who helped us really think through, what do we want it to look like? What were the things that we wanted to lift up? And you'll note that the X is very prominent in our branding. We wanted to use the X in Black women as just an indicator that this space was not just meant for cis women, Black cis women. We wanted to expand farther and let our Black trans women know that this was a space for them, that gender nonconforming and non-binary folks, this was meant for them, that we weren't being rigid in our definition of woman, and that this space was wider than just that. Secondarily, the actual X, if you'll note, it's made up of small boxes, is actually the Indrinka symbol for democracy. So we kind of brought a little bit of our African heritage and visuals into the piece. And then we utilize a lot of imagery of dope Black women in history, Toni Morrison, Fannie Lou Hamer, and lots of others that we wanted to incorporate into the visuals that we used. And that was more about building a brand identity, again, separate from a political process, but more about the community that we were looking to build. So if you felt a connection to Toni Morrison or Fannie Lou Hamer and this larger idea of Black womanhood and Blackness, then you would see that this was a place for you to be. And brand identity is critical to having a flexible brand. You want to make sure that your identity is specific, but also wide enough to gather the folks that you actually want to be involved in the work that you're doing. So the next step in our evolution was that we did move forward and endorse Senator Elizabeth Warren for president. And this was a large undertaking. We had several things that went into it, including an endorsement statement. We had a lot of outreach, and we launched with 100 Black women for Warren. And it was a really exciting for us. You'll see that initially our endorsement video got 500,000 views almost immediately, which is very exciting for us. The other thing is that you'll see that we noted the names of all of the 100 Black women that signed, but they're in alphabetical order. And this was a really deliberate choice on our part, and again, about the flexibility. We didn't want any specific people to be listed higher than others or separate than others. And so we just went with, let's put everybody in alphabetical order, because all of their voices are equal in the space that we were trying to build. And it was a really exciting way to move into an endorsement process and into a very progressively framed relationship with a political campaign and a presidential campaign. So once we had our endorsement, then the work came in again. And talking about flexibility is that we really wanted to stay true to the roots of the work that we were doing as Black Women For, which is that this isn't about a candidate per se, but it is about endorsing someone we felt aligned with the things that we gleaned from the three-tiered process that I talked about earlier, from our in-person events, from our online digital meetups, and from the survey. And so the big basis of, or the largest basis of our endorsement was that Senator Warren and her team were there and ready to listen to us. And in addition to that, we had several things that she had agreed to prior to us actually formally announcing our endorsement. And one of those included accountability, not perfection. And so she knew that we were going to be, even in the campaign and throughout the campaign, holding her accountable if things went left or if something happened that we didn't agree with. This is how the flexibility piece comes in as well, because we weren't locked into agreeing with everything that the candidate that we decided to endorse said, has said, will say in the future. We were standing up into our truth and saying, we're endorsing this person for these reasons, and we're going to be holding them accountable for the work that they are going to be doing and moving forward. And so from there, we were able to, the steering committee went to Boston to have a very long conversation directly with Senator Warren. Most of us had already met Senator Warren in multiple different conversations before this, but this was a time we all were able to get together and have an in-depth conversation about our endorsement, yes, but also about the work that she was looking forward to doing with us on the campaign trail, and if we were lucky, in the White House as well. We also held a digital meetup just after we endorsed, and we had Deshauna Bernard, who was the Black outreach director for Team Warren, come and talk to us about the Warren campaign, about the staff that was there. And then I really wanted to highlight the third picture that's on this page, which is that we made a concerted effort to make sure that we were seen as a place that the Black staff on Team Warren could come to with issues to build community. And so we had a lunch with them while we were in Boston with just all of the Black staff, which, as you can see, is quite large for Team Warren. And it was really great just to be able to see how many Black folks she had working on her campaign in all areas: policy, comms, all of the different facets of her campaign had Black leadership involved. And we were really happy to be able to make connections with them and be a support system for them as well. And there, again, that goes to the flexibility of the brand that we were building, which was, we weren't just there to support the candidate. We wanted to make sure that our people that were part of this campaign were also taken care of in the same ways that we would want ourselves to be taken care of. So I want to talk a little bit about this community accountability piece, because this piece is really what allowed us to be as flexible as we were as a brand. Even though we were endorsing a political candidate, the accountability piece is what allowed us to move forward with this endorsement and keep our own personal integrity intact. And this meant that Senator Warren knew if something happened, she was going to have to talk to us, and we were going to have to get through whatever the issue was. And so we did have an issue where we had to go into an accountability process with Senator Warren and her team. I'll talk briefly about it, and I wanted to give a shout out to Rakia Lumumba, who's pictured here, because she was really integral in moving this accountability process forward. So there, a video came out where all of the candidates running for the Democratic nomination were asked their opinion about the death penalty. And while Senator Warren said she was staunchly against the death penalty, she made a comment that for people that commit really bad crimes, we should just lock them up and throw away the key. Now, as Black women, as Black organizers, this really didn't sit well with us, especially as we have several people on our steering committee that are working on abolition and have been working in real time during the campaign and at the time that this happened to address the atrocious conditions in prisons around the country in St. Louis and also in Mississippi as well. And the timing of this was really interesting because this was right before a large group of Black Women for community members were about to hit the campaign trail. A bunch of us were heading to South Carolina. Some were going to Iowa. We had people going to pretty much almost all of the initial primary states. And so this was on a Friday. We were set to hit the ground on Saturday and kind of had this monkey wrench thrown in that we knew we needed to address. To Senator Warren's credit and to her team's credit, and also to the agreement, right? This flexible agreement that we went into with the campaign for our endorsement. That Sunday morning, Senator Warren and her team jumped onto a call with those members of our steering committee that were not on the road to have a really deep conversation about what this was, what the problems were with this framing and what we needed to see happen next. And what came out of that conversation was not only a better understanding on Senator Warren and her team's part around why this language around getting people that are behind bars and how our elderly are treated, but it actually led to specific policy change with regard to having people age out of prison and treating our elderly the way that they need to, regardless of whether they're locked up or not. And Rakia was really critical to moving that policy change ahead. And so again, this is just another example of how our flexibility and our insistence on autonomy, even in the process of endorsing a political candidate, what allowed us to push harder than it would if we had just said we were for a candidate and left it at that. So this flexible piece is what has allowed us to be super nimble and to push the candidates that we really felt strongly about in the direction that we wanted to. And it also lifted this conversation into the public sphere in a different way and modeled a different way of endorsing political candidates and what your interactions with them can and cannot look like. So after that, we were asked by the Warren campaign to help them put together a large event in Atlanta, Georgia at Clark, Atlanta. And we were really excited to do that. We got to choose so many pieces of this amazing event that happened, including the image that you see here, which was really the focus of Senator Warren's speech, the value of the work of Black women. And so when I say we had input directly on everything, we got to choose this image. We got to just give feedback on what the event looked like. We got to do the graphics to promote the event. We had specific requests around making sure that students in Atlanta were able to come and get tickets first. We had buses that we had are going to schools and areas around Atlanta to make sure additional people could come. One of our steering committee members, Carmen Berkeley, who also is a DJ in addition to being an amazing digital strategist and organizer, was the DJ for the event. And Angela Peoples, who is our director, spoke on the stage introducing Ayanna Pressley, Representative Ayanna Pressley, who subsequently introduced Senator Warren. And so I say all of that to mean that we were invited to create a space that was natural and true to Black women for and to the community that we were building, to invite people in. And this just goes back to the same points that I made about the invitation to the in-person meetups, which is that people need to feel that the invitations that are extended to them have taken into account the needs that they have. That flexibility is critical. And we were really excited to be able to flex that particular muscle in the context of an actual event with this political candidate. And Atlanta was a really great time. You can see all of these amazing images from that event. From there, we hit the campaign trail, and we brought that same flexibility and clarity of who we wanted to be interacting with. And so even when we went to Iowa, which, as y'all know, is a very, very white state, we insisted on going to Waterloo, which has the largest Black population, and doing a meetup with Black folks in Waterloo. We did a beauty shop and barbershop tour in South Carolina. So we wanted to really meet our people wherever we were, where they were already. And this was not a case of just putting us up in, on a panel or attending events that people had already planned. We wanted to meet people where they were. So I got to go to South Carolina several times. I mentioned earlier that I'm from Charlotte, so it was really easy for me to get to South Carolina. And so we would go to, like Charlene's Home Cooking and have lunch with 5 or 6 community members to talk about their needs. And we patrored Black businesses in each of these communities. We went to church services and got to speak with elders in the community as well to talk about what they were seeing and what was happening. Now, these are states that are inundated with candidates and campaigns as in the lead up to their primaries. And what we heard consistently was they were surprised to see a group of Black women showing up in their state with such integrity, such authenticity, and really wanting to listen to what people had to say. And that was an extension of how Senator Warren wanted to show up on the campaign. But for us, it was about continuing to build community. And regardless of the outcome of the primary, knowing that the actions that we took during the primary were in alignment with the values that we set out with in building the Black Woman For brand. We did a couple of other things on the campaign trail as well. We had some digital phone banks. We did Black Women for Warren weekends, where we had people taking action all over the country. And we also hosted a series of debate watch parties, which were really fun to see people gather And obviously, we also ended up doing lots of press when we were on the ground for the campaign as well. The crux of all of this stuff is that we were able to be the ones that dictated how things looked. So you see even our debate watch party, that does not look like a Team Warren debate watch party logo. You see Senator Warren's logo is not even on the image. Again, we were focused on Black women, gender nonconforming Black folks, and an invitation to them to come and be in community with us. Regardless of who they were supporting in the primary, this was always at its core about building community together, flexing political power as a collective, and connecting with people that were interested in and focused on the same issues that we were. So obviously, the primary did not go our way. Senator Warren lost the race shortly after Super Tuesday, which was obviously a disappointment to all of us, not just because of all the hard work that we put in, but because we really felt Senator Warren was such a strong candidate, and she spent so much time listening to Black women's issues, and her policies and her platform reflected that. And so, while it was sad to leave that part of the work behind, that did not stop the brand of Black Women For, because we never centered the work that we were doing in a single candidate or in a single party. So that allowed us to continue to build community together. So everybody went into lockdown, and things were a little bit hectic after Super Tuesday, as I'm sure all of you know. And so the first thing we did is we wanted to have some fun. So we held what we call the 90s virtual kickback, where we had 4 amazing Black DJs come and spin for us. And in between, we had some conversations with different people. Senator Warren was great enough to come and have a conversation with Angela, and Ayanna Pressley also came through and had a great conversation in between. And it really was, again, back to our initial roots of building community, helping people connect with each other, having fun with each other, laughing with each other, and even in the midst of a pandemic, knowing that we still can build community together, we still can come together and connect with each other. This just speaks to, again, the flexibility of this. We were able to have, I think we had like 400 people or so that came to the kickback. We broadcast it also on Twitter. We had an amazing amount of folks that were watching it there as well. And it was just a testament to the fact that we had done what we set out to do, which was we built a brand that, even though we ended up endorsing a single candidate, our brand existed outside of that work. And we were able to continue building community and pulling folks together in really significant and meaningful ways for them, for their lives, and for the work that they do in the world. I'll also add that we have a really amazing Facebook group, and that group is still there. We have so many amazing conversations that happen there. We have so many issues that get brought into the space of questions people are asking about things happening in the world, really in-depth, detailed conversations about that. And we've continued to build community digitally that way as well. The last thing that I wanted to mention before closing out is that we also were so excited that in our community of Black Women For, we had 8 people that decided to run for office in the midst of this process. And so even after Senator Warren was no longer on the campaign trail, we had people like Whitney Walker and Jasmine Rogers Shaw that were part of our community that are running for office. And we were able to push support to them, to be a support for them, and to help them and their campaigns reach a wider audience. And so again, this is more about that flexibility of not waiting for people to organize us, and for empowering Black women, gender nonconforming Black folks, and non-binary people to step into their own power and see that this is a brand that can continue to support the work that they're doing. And we're really excited. Jasmine and Whitney and the other candidates are doing really, really well so far. And we're excited to see what happens in each of those races. But this just for us was a signal that the work continues, and that we had done what we set out to do, which was built a brand that could hold in a container that could support a lot of different voices and can speak to the progressive collective voice of Black women, gender nonconforming, and non-binary Black people. I'll leave you with this shot here, which I think is just for me an emotional connection to the work that Black Women For and the joy that was at the center of it. So many of the folks that were on our steering committee and also helped us on the campaign trail and even just building our digital spaces have said to us so many times, the thing that they come back to so often and what they love so much about Black Women For was that joy was always present. And this picture is indicative of that. It was taken on the stage at Clark Atlanta before Representative Presley came out, and you can just see on all of our faces that we were so happy to be there, so happy to be together, so happy to have built this space that was able to hold the dreams and the aspirations of so many people, and that the work continues, our individual work continues, and that we bring that joy with us everywhere that we go. So I am all done with my session. I hope that you were able to take some really great lessons on how you build a flexible brand in digital spaces and also in real life. The things that I hope that you take away from this are threefold. One is that you really don't have to wait for anybody to organize you or the communities that you seek to be connected to. This is a power that we have at our fingertips, literally on our phones, on our desktops, on our tablets, to do ourselves. We don't have to wait for structures that have continually not served us and assume that that's the only pathway to building power and to building community. And the flexibility of this brand of Black Women For has allowed me personally as a digital strategist, as an organizer, to really start thinking outside the box about what it means to invite people in and to create spaces for them where they feel both welcome, heard, and that their whole selves can be present. It's not an absence of conflict. It actually is community with conflict. So we can have different opinions, we can have different stances, we can have different approaches to things, but if we build with the basis of joy, we build with the basis of inviting people to bring their whole selves to the work that we're trying to do together, amazing, magical, beautiful things can happen. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share the story of Black Women For with all of you and to talk you through some of the strategic decisions that we made along the way that allowed us to engage in a political process in a new and different way, and to really think about what it means to endorse a candidate and hold them accountable for the work that they say they want to do for us, on behalf of us, and for our communities as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of DrupalCon. It's just such a pleasure to be here, and hopefully next time we see each other, it will be in person. Thanks so much to everyone who helped make sure that I was able to be here, and you all have a great, great rest of the event.